I arrived in the small mining village of Montsu on a cold and windy night. The rain had started again, thin and cold like needles on my face. I walked for hours along the empty road, holding my small bundle of clothes under my coat. I had no family, no home, and no job. I was hungry, tired, and afraid, but I kept walking because I had nowhere else to go. When I saw the first lights of the village, I felt something like hope. I thought maybe this place would give me a chance to start again. I had heard about the coal mine at Le Voreux. People said it gave work to hundreds of men and women. They also said it was a hard and dangerous place, but I did not care. I needed work more than anything. When I reached the gates, it was still dark. The morning shift was beginning. I saw the men walking to the pit with their lamps, their faces already black from old coal dust. Some of them looked at me, but no one spoke. The only sound was the heavy noise of the machines and the deep voice of the earth opening below them. A thin man came toward me. His name was Etienne Lantier. He looked young, but his eyes were tired. I told him I needed work. He said there were no jobs for women underground anymore, but maybe the manager could find something for me at the surface. He spoke kindly, and that small kindness almost made me cry. He asked if I had eaten, and I said no. Without another word, he gave me a piece of bread from his pocket. It was dry, but to me, it tasted like life. After that, he took me to a small wooden house near the pit. There I met the Mahu family. They lived in one of the miners' houses, all built the same, one next to another like boxes. The mother, known as Mahuda, looked strong but tired. Her hands were red and rough from washing and cooking. She had 7 children, and still she gave me a cup of hot soup. I sat by their small fire and watched as she prepared food for her husband and the older children before they went to the mine. The smell of soup mixed with the smell of coal and damp clothes. I had never felt such hunger. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more every week. When morning came, I followed the Mahus to the mine. The sky was heavy with clouds. Etienne was waiting near the entrance. The miners moved in silence, their lamps swinging in the dark. It was like a line of ghosts going down into the earth. I could not see the bottom of the shaft, only the black hole that swallowed them. I stayed at the surface that day. I helped the women who sorted the coal. Our hands were black, and our backs hurt, but we worked until evening. The pay was small, but I was thankful to have it. Life in the village was hard. The miners worked 12 hours a day, sometimes more. The air underground was hot and heavy, full of dust that made them cough all night. The children worked too. They carried baskets of coal and pushed wagons through the narrow tunnels. The little ones were covered in black dust, their faces pale under it. The families lived from week to week, always waiting for their pay, always afraid it would not be enough. At night, the houses were full of tired voices, and the smell of soup boiling on weak fires. Sometimes there was laughter, sometimes singing, but often there was silence, and you could feel the sadness hiding under every sound. I began to know each face in the street, faces marked by years of work and worry, yet they still smiled at each other, still shared what they had. There was a strange kind of love in their poverty. Etienne came to see the Mahu family often. He spoke about justice, about how miners deserved more than hunger and cold. Some of the men laughed at him, others listened in silence. I listened too. I did not understand everything, but I felt that he was right. He said that one day things would change. One day the workers would rise and the owners would have to see their pain. His words were like fire in the cold of our lives. Winter came and it was cruel. The ground froze hard and snow covered the poor gardens behind the houses. Coal was expensive, so many families had no fire. I saw children sleep close together under thin blankets, their lips blue with cold. My hands cracked and bled from washing clothes in icy water. But we still worked. We still believed we could survive. Sometimes, on Sundays, Etienne read from old books about workers in other countries. He said people were fighting for a better world everywhere. It sounded like a dream, but I wanted to believe it. Then one evening, news spread that the mine company was cutting pay again. The men were furious. They said they could not live on less. There was no food, no coal, and now no hope. That night, in the small kitchen of the Maheu house, Etienne spoke again. He said we must stand together. He said no one should go to work until the company listened. The word strike passed from house to house like a secret flame. Women whispered it, men spoke it in low voices, and the children listened without understanding. When the day came, no one went down the mine. The yard was empty and quiet, except for the sound of the wind. The company guards walked around, angry and nervous. They shouted at anyone who stopped near the gate. But the people stood in groups, watching. They did not move, only waited. It was a strange silence, stronger than any noise. It was the silence of hunger and anger and fear. For days, the miners stayed at home. The food ran out quickly. Mothers gave the last pieces of bread to their children and drank water themselves. Some families boiled old bones to make soup. I saw Mahude crying one night when she thought no one could see. Etienne tried to keep our courage alive. He spoke of victory, of justice, of a better future. But the children cried from hunger, and the men began to lose hope. Then, one morning, soldiers arrived. Their boots made heavy sounds on the frozen road. They were sent to keep order, but their presence filled everyone with fear. We knew what could happen when soldiers came. The air was cold, but the tension was hotter than any fire. The men still refused to go down the mine. They stood at the gate, their hands shaking not from cold, but from anger. The manager came out and spoke loudly. He said anyone who wanted work could return, but those who refused would lose everything. No one moved. The soldiers looked at each other, waiting for an order. I stood near Etienne, my heart beating fast. I could not breathe. The snow fell slowly around us, soft and white, but the ground felt ready to break. That was the day the strike became war. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The strike continued, and every day became heavier than the one before. The men stood near the mine gates, their faces pale with hunger. The women tried to keep their children quiet, but the crying never stopped. The sound of hunger is a strange thing. It is not only in the stomach, it also lives in the air, in the walls, and even in people's eyes. At night, the houses were dark because we had no coal. I remember sitting near a candle with the Maheu family. The little flame moved with the wind that came through the cracks in the wall. Maheude's youngest child was coughing, and she held him close to her chest. Her husband sat at the table, his head in his hands. No one spoke for a long time. Then Etienne came in. His face looked thinner, but his eyes still had the same light. He said we must not give up. The company was waiting for us to be weak, and if we stayed strong, they would have to listen. I wanted to believe him, but it was not easy. My hands were shaking from hunger. The children's stomachs were empty. Sometimes we found old pieces of bread in the rubbish behind the company's shop. We washed them, and even that felt like a meal. Some men started to steal coal from the mine at night. It was dangerous, but without fire we could not survive. The owners of the mine stayed in their large houses, or saw us far from us. They sent messages through the manager saying the company could not pay more. They said we were lazy and ungrateful, but they never came to see the black dust on the faces of our children. They never saw the mothers searching for food in the snow. Soon, the soldiers began to visit the village every day. They marched through the streets with their guns. Some were young, and they looked afraid too. The miners watched them from their windows. There was no fighting yet, but everyone knew it could happen. The air was full of anger. You could feel it, like thunder waiting inside the clouds. One morning, I went with Mahude to find food. We walked miles through the cold fields to another village. We hoped to buy some bread there, but no one wanted to sell to us. They said the mine people were troublemakers. On the way back, Mahude fell in the snow. She was weak, and I helped her up. She looked at me and said, "They are killing us slowly." I did not answer because I knew she was right. When we returned, the men were meeting again near the pit. Etienne stood in front of them, his voice calm but strong. He said that the company must see that the miners were human beings, not animals. He said the rich lived from the blood of the poor. His words made people cry and cheer at the same time. For a moment, everyone forgot their pain. We believed that if we stood together, something would change. But the company had other plans. The next week, they brought new workers from another town. These men went down into the mine while we watched from outside. They were poor like us, and we did not hate them, but we could not forgive them either. They were taking our bread. The miners shouted and threw stones. The soldiers pushed everyone back, and that was when the first shot was fired. It happened so fast that I did not understand at first. I only heard the sound of the gun, and then a scream. A man fell to the ground, blood on his chest. For a second, everything was quiet. Then people began to run and cry. Some shouted for revenge, others called for help. I stood frozen, unable to move. The snow around the dead man turned red, and I felt the world change in that moment. After that day, fear lived with us. The soldiers stayed near the mine, and no one could go close without being stopped. Some men were arrested, others disappeared. The strike was not broken yet, but people began to lose hope. Children asked for food, and mothers had nothing to give. Men sat silent for hours, staring at the floor. Even Etienne looked different now. He still spoke of justice, but his voice was softer. Hunger had touched his spirit too. One night, I went outside and looked at the mine from far away. The tall tower stood against the dark sky like a black tree. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. The wind carried the smell of cold metal and dust. I thought about all the people working underground, about their sweat and blood left in those tunnels. I felt small before that darkness, and I cried quietly because I knew the mine would never care about us. A few days later, the company decided to open the pit again with the new workers. The miners tried to stop them. They gathered near the gates early in the morning. I was there too. The air was cold, and everyone was tense. When the first group of replacement workers arrived, the crowd began to shout. Some women screamed, others begged them not to go in. The soldiers stood between the two groups, guns ready. Then someone threw a stone, and the fight began. It was chaos. People were shouting and pushing. Soldiers fired into the air, but the noise only made the crowd angrier. I saw Mayhew run forward to pull his son back. But before he could move, another shot rang out. He fell hard, face down in the dirt. Mahude screamed, and I ran to help her, but the soldiers pushed us away. She tried to reach her husband, but two soldiers held her back. The snow was red again, and I felt sick. After that, everything broke. The soldiers drove us away with their guns. The strike was over. People went home crying, empty and defeated. That night, the mine gates opened again, and smoke returned to the sky. The company had won. The next days were quiet. The village looked dead. No one sang or talked. Children sat near the doors, their eyes empty. The wind blew through the streets, carrying dust and the smell of coal. I helped Mahude with her children. She did not speak much. Her husband was gone, and there was no money. She worked for other families, washing and cleaning, while I stayed with the little ones. Sometimes I felt angry at Etienne, but I also knew he had tried to help. He came to visit us one evening, his face pale and tired. He said he would leave soon. He wanted to find work in another town, far from Montsou. I wanted to ask him to stay, but I knew he could not. His dream was broken here, like so many others. When he left, it was still dark. He walked down the same road where I had first seen him. I watched until he disappeared into the fog. The mine started to hum again, the machines shaking the ground. Life continued, though it did not feel like life anymore. Sometimes I thought about leaving too, but I could not. I had nowhere else to go. The mine had taken everything from me, yet I could not escape it. Every morning I saw the black smoke rise and felt the same pull in my heart. It was like the earth itself wanted to keep me there. Still, somewhere deep inside, I carried a small light of hope. Maybe one day, not for me, but for someone else, things would be different. Maybe one day the mines would stop eating lives. Until then, we worked, we suffered, and we remembered those who were lost in the dark. Months passed, and the cold winter slowly turned into a soft spring. The snow melted from the fields, and the black mud returned. Life in Montsou began again, but not as before. The people still worked in the mine, but something had changed in their hearts. The songs had gone from their mouths, and the laughter was rare. Every family had lost someone. Every street carried the memory of the strike. I was still living with the Mayhew family. Their home was smaller now, because two of the children had died during the hunger. The walls were thin, and the wind still came in through the cracks, but it was quiet there. Mahude worked long hours for rich families in the next town, washing their clothes and cleaning their floors. She came home tired, but she never complained. She said she had no more tears left. I spent most of my days helping her. I washed, I cooked, I took care of the younger children. Sometimes I went to the mine to meet the men during their lunch breaks. Their faces were black with coal, their eyes empty. When I looked at them, I felt the same mix of anger and sadness that I had felt since the day of the strike. It was strange to think that we had once believed things could change. Now it seemed like only the mine would last forever. Etienne never came back. Some said he found work in another mining town. Others said he left the country. I did not know which was true, but sometimes, at night, I thought about his words about justice, about the future. I still wanted to believe that his fight had not been useless. Even if we had lost, maybe his dream would live in someone else's heart. One morning, I walked past the pit and saw a new group of young men going down into the shaft. They were strong and full of energy, their faces clean and full of life. Watching them, I thought of all those who had gone before them, who had given their strength and their blood to the same dark tunnels. I wondered how long it would take before the mine took that light from them too. The days became warmer, and the fields near the village started to grow again. The earth looked alive, covered with green grass. I went out often to walk there, far from the noise of the mine. The air smelled clean, and for a while I could forget the black dust that covered everything in Montsou. I liked to sit on a small hill where I could see the whole village below. The mine looked small from there, like a dark wound on the land. Sometimes I thought about leaving. I wanted to go south, where there was more sun and where people said the work was easier. But I was afraid to start again. I had started too many times already. Each new beginning had only led me back to hunger and pain. I told myself that at least here I knew the people and they knew me. We shared the same story, the same scars. One evening, I went to fetch water from the well near the pit. It was late and the air was cold again. The sky was full of stars. I heard the sound of the mine, the deep breathing of the machines underground. It sounded like the earth was alive, like it was dreaming. I stopped and looked at the black tower against the sky. It looked strong, but also tired. Then I saw something, a group of men coming out of the mine, singing softly. It was not a happy song, but it was something new, something brave. Their voices were rough, but full of feeling. That night, I could not sleep. I thought about those voices. Maybe, even after everything, the people were still alive inside. Maybe the mine could not take that away. I felt something warm in my chest, something that I had not felt for a long time. It was hope. It was small, like a candle in the wind, but it was there. The next morning, I went to visit the cemetery. Many miners were buried there, including Mayhew. The ground was still soft from the spring rain. I brought a few wildflowers and placed them on his grave. I looked at the names on the other stones. There were so many lives lost to hunger, to work, to the mine itself. I whispered to them that I had not forgotten. None of us had. On my way back, I saw some children playing near the road. Their faces were still thin, but they were laughing. They had made a ball from old cloth, and they were kicking it around, shouting and smiling. For a moment, I stood and watched them. The sound of their laughter filled the air, light and clear like a promise. Maybe they would grow up and build a better life. Maybe they would have the courage to fight again, but in a new way, not with stones and anger, but with knowledge and unity. As the months went by, I began to help at the small school in the village. The teacher was old and sick, so I helped the children read and write. Many of them were from mining families. They came with black hands and tired eyes, but they wanted to learn. I loved those moments. When a child learned a new word, his face lit up like a lamp. It made me believe that learning could be stronger than the mine. Every day, I told them stories about the world beyond Monsu, about cities with tall buildings and clean streets, about seas and mountains and green fields that never turned black. The children listened with wide eyes. Sometimes I told them about Etienne too, not his name, but his ideas. I said there were people who believed the poor could have justice, that no one should live in darkness forever. Years passed. I grew older, and the mine kept working. New families came, and old ones left. The Mayhew children grew up. Some went down into the pit, others went to the city. The company built new houses, a little stronger but still gray. The world outside changed slowly. People talked about machines and rights, about workers joining together. Sometimes men came to the village with leaflets, speaking of new laws. The miners listened more carefully now. They were no longer afraid to speak. One summer evening, I sat again on my hill, looking down at the mine. The sun was setting behind it, and the sky was red and gold. For the first time, I saw beauty even in that dark place. I thought of everyone who had lived and died there, of their pain and their courage. Maybe they had not died for nothing. Maybe each life lost had planted a seed. I closed my eyes and felt the wind on my face. The smell of coal was still there, but it no longer felt like a curse. It felt like memory, heavy but alive. I knew I would stay in Monsu. It was my home now, and the story of my life was written here, in the dust, the cold, and the few bright moments of hope. I was the girl from the mine, and I had seen the worst of life and the small light that still survived in it. I had seen people break, but also rise again. I had seen hunger, but I had also seen kindness. And I knew that even in the darkest tunnels, a little light could live forever if someone carried it in their heart. That night, I walked home under the stars. The wind was soft, and I heard a sound from far away, the deep hum of the mine, mixing with the quiet singing of the men underground. It was not a sad sound anymore. It was the sound of life continuing. The earth was still turning, and somewhere deep below, hope was waiting to rise again. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.